Hello, and welcome to the 10th episode of the Talos Principle. Before I dive right in, I want you to take note of these paintings on the wall. A bit about mummies and perhaps a bit on the processes of it. That will be the subject of discussion for today, but before we get into that, there's some things to discover here.
I see all. I know all. My power knows no bounds. And yet your will is free because you were made to be free. It is the very principle of your existence, without which the trials of this world would hold no meaning. To seek salvation must be your choice.
The idea of an all-knowing being and a lesser being with free will is a bit contradictory. While, yes, I could choose to put on blue socks or white socks in the morning, if a being knows for certain that in the future I will put on blue socks, then no amount of decision-making I have will ever be able to defy that. In fact, there's even a contradiction between all-powerful and all-knowing, because an all-powerful being would still be unable to defy the future it knows will happen. Let's see what Alexander has to say. Her memory seems to be ruining the ground beneath it.
I keep having these dreams. Great empty cities, silent roads stretching for miles, the earth from space, all dark. Not a single light to guide me home. But if someone really came from another world, what would the earth look like to them? A wilderness? A wasteland? I don't think so. Even after thousands of years, they'd see a world shaped by our hand in every aspect of its being. They'd see the cities and the roads, the bridges, the harbors, and they would say, here lived a race of giants. These dreams, they scare me, but they also remind me that we built all of this.
Some might object to the idea that our constructions would last for thousands of years if we were to die. But here we are in an ancient Egyptian themed level with structures and writings and even events like mummification that we can only put into a video game today because they existed in some way or another for thousands of years. And just like how some hieroglyphics or stone tablets might be obscured through the ages to the point where they are nigh incomprehensible, well, so too is our own stuff obscured. All those files in the terminal have been rendered inaccessible due to time. And speaking of which, by now some would guess that something outside of the simulation is happening that's quite lethal. Certainly enough for a weight loss blog to start going on and on about all the unhealthy food he'll eat. It is a bit odd though. Death is already inevitable. I do not think in this universe they've ever invented life extending technology or immortality itself. So why work so hard on your body, denying yourself pleasures like a triple bacon burger with double cheese and extra onions? Because death is 50, 60, 70 years away, but if it might be a few months or a few years away, you decide to go crazy. It certainly isn't the only case of this. There was even a fairly popular song in the 2000s called Live Like You Are Dying. Guy goes on and on about how he discovers he has some sort of cancer, and, well, a guy is singing about another guy telling him this, and he decides to do all the crazy, silly, and wonderful things he denied himself in life, simply because what? That he might do them later in life, when he's far too old to even fully appreciate them or take part in them. I have come to see that these mysteries are not all for his children to solve. Only the designer himself could ever truly understand the infinite complexity of his creation. I will gaze at his work in worship, and I just realized during these playthroughs that his full name is One with Faith. The W/ I did not recognize as being with until recently. And what's funny is, in a normal bit of text, I would recognize that. Well, I didn't need to look up the answer for this problem. When I first went through this area here, this puzzle, it did actually take a long time for me to figure out. But such a lengthy puzzle gives me plenty of time to ramble on. So I will say that you remember the mummies in the previous, hub area? It's interesting that when the Egyptians were preserving their dead, they actually disregarded the brain. To them, it was just some cooling unit for the heart. And so when the body was being prepared for the gods, they would scoop out the brain, dump it away, not even preserve it like other organs, but just dump it away because it was useless. Certainly, we now would understand that there's no chance for a mummy to come back. Zombies already stretch it, but a creature completely without a brain? Now that is just silly. But aren't our own post-mortem methods also a bit crude? We just put bodies in a coffin and bury them underground. Not exactly the most advanced method of preservation. We've come to expect that the body will eventually dissipate away, so it seems like an odd ritual to do even today. Why not just have a tombstone, have a gravestone in the ground, but not go through the whole burial? Quite simply, it's because we've always done so. Let's briefly pause and read some messages. Epitaph, Child Program version 10.6, codename One with Faith, terminated here. Logic, worship the designer for some number of days, then allowed the serpent into its heart. Final memory dump, I ask the designer for forgiveness, that I may join him in the eternal memory. Progeny programs, the @ symbol, samsara, and sheep. I guess someone met their end here. Seems we're all connected somehow, like some distant family relations. Different versions, different series. What are we? Sheep. Who cares? Just be grateful we don't have to read anything more about our great designer, the Greek, character. It's a bit odd that sheep would be a descendant of faith, thinking so differently than his father or his original. But then again, kids today are able to rebel against their parents' beliefs and ideals. The son of Ronald Reagan, as I recall, is quite liberal and also an atheist. But going back to the silly ways we preserve the dead, we keep the dead in boxes underground, even though that's not at all useful to us, and not even useful to them. The dead will decompose and they are no more. We can cremate the dead, which is a bit more efficient and takes up less land space, but that's not really preserving them then, is it? That's quite the opposite. We have no illusions that they will be still around. But there is one method of preserving the dead that is fairly recent, that seems to carry out a very similar philosophy as the ancient Egyptians, and that's through cryostasis. Unlike the Egyptians, though, we understand the importance of the brain. In fact, some people undergoing cryostasis specifically request, for cost-related reasons, cost and resources, that they just freeze the head. Whatever you do with the body, it doesn't matter. Just keep the brain. Okay, so I get that I'm supposed to retrieve these sigils. I just don't get why. Sure, the loud voice is telling me to, but this world of his has no context, no purpose, and no foundation from which to construct them. Or at least you have a loud voice telling you. We do silly things even without loud voices telling us outright. I'm convinced there are answers here if we look hard enough. We have to work together on this. I don't specifically recall if Sheep lives or dies, but I do hope he lives. He is my favorite of the robots so far. So in addition to keeping the brain around, the body is also much more efficiently preserved. We aren't wrapping up the body in sheets, and we aren't removing a bunch of organs from it, or at the very least not completely pulverizing the most essential organ. You can always get a new heart, you can always get a new liver, but even within transhumanist circles, there are still people who would shy away from the concept of getting a new brain. Unlike the Scarecrow, we'd rather keep our own. Or at least, if we do get it replaced, it would be a one-for-one, one-by-one neuron replacement. A Theseus ship method, shall we say. Plank by plank, neuron by neuron. But in any case, our method of preserving dead bodies with cryonics is much more refined and advanced than mummification, especially with some recent innovations in the field where we aren't just strictly freezing the body, which would allow ice crystals to form and damage the organs and brain. And while the Egyptians believed that mummifying the body will preserve it for the afterlife, where it can be judged by the gods, their heart, the ever-essential component of them, weighed against a feather. People who undergo cryonics, they believe that they'll wake up in some far distant future. I do think that it is possible, though with no good evidence. I suppose here you can say it is my matter of faith that we can resurrect the dead in some way. Humans are, after all, just natural entities. We don't have a soul to contend with, no key component that comprises us that will leave us when we die. But it will be difficult, certainly. And who knows, maybe it is impossible. Maybe there is some insurmountable barrier to it. But in the wise words of Cave Johnson, science isn't about asking why, but why not? And why not try to conquer what's arguably the biggest hurdle to our continued existence in nature? Other than the laws of thermodynamics, of course. But we can probably violate those too once we're advanced enough. We are indeed a stubborn enough species to do so. Now I've been standing up here and rambling, and you're probably wanting me to go down and talk to that terminal there. There's something else we can do. You might notice on this moon that it's very difficult for a video game with a large moon or even a small one, to make it look like anything but a two-dimensional penned picture slapped into the sky. But by zooming in close and hovering over, you can see there's one of the tripods there. What happens if we connect a laser to the moon? Even though it's three-dimensional, it still looks 2D in my opinion. Only now that it's rotating does it have the illusion of a third dimension. The conspiracy theorists were right, or partially right. It's not hollow, it's just halved. No wonder we never see the dark side of the moon. I'm sure many of you would recognize this as the portal symbol. A nice little Easter egg, considering Portal is also a puzzle game heavily featuring robots. And if you look right up there, you can see, I think, either the Space Corps or Wheatley from the second game. There's quite a few Easter eggs in this game, but this is the only one I really know of how to get. But enough rambling on about portal moons and cryostasis. Let's ramble on to a computer terminal. You say that consciousness is some kind of functional system. Arrange bits of matter into the right order, and out springs sentience. That's all very well on paper, but if what counts is what something does, not what it's made of, then couldn't you and I design a series of tin cans on strings that qualify as being conscious? Here, I will take the position that this robot guy I'm playing on is indeed conscious. Its AI is advanced enough that it has achieved what we would call consciousness. Artificial intelligence, like any other computer programming, is done through logic gates, 0 and 1 binary, as you might understand. You can make a logic gate out of tin cans and strings, and with enough tin cans and strings, and enough space and enough time, you can make a logic gate that's so advanced that, yeah, I would say it would qualify as being conscious. What a bizarre idea. I'll send you a notification when the signposts start complaining. Well, here you're just being stubborn and difficult. I never said that signposts were able to be conscious, but you can form logic gates out of cans and strings, and ones that are as complex as a logic gate powering you, or my character, or any AI so advanced that we'd call it conscious, that might be developed in real life. Are the tides and the ecosystem sentient as well? Any organized system qualifies? Of course not. Not any organized system. I'm relieved they're... Actually, hold on.
Do not think I know not the deceiver slithering through the hidden words. His wisdom is hollow and born of despair. Do not let him tangle you in his webs of delusion. Have faith in me, and his petty illusions will fall away like nightmares in the morning's light.
So I guess this is the terminal and conversation Faith read and had, and Elohim interjected there as well. Then Faith basically killed himself. In which case, does this happen to every robot? Are these two working together secretly? So I'll just skip ahead. How consciousness can be so intimately familiar to you, yet so obscure, I just don't understand. Don't mind him. He's just worried that if you ask too many questions, you'll start to see through his shtick. Stick with me, and the sky will quite literally be the limit. At any rate, I'd like you to think a bit harder about all this and get back to me. I'm sure there's still progress to be made. Well, I'm sure it'll make a lovely, rambling discussion for the next episode. But I have talked about all I wanted to discuss for this episode. Collected its star, collected all these sigils. I believe we can call this one done. Certainly is a beautiful little area here, though. For whatever reason, this part counts as out of bounds. You don't really see a lot of nighttime areas, just like you don't see a lot of rainy and foggy areas. But it is quite beautiful in my opinion. Though we've sort of tarnished the beauty by having red lasers point to everything and flipped over the moon. Not able to unlock that other asset yet, but next episode we shall, and it'll be quite fun. One thing I liked about the fan puzzles in this episode, and indeed something the game does quite often with its new assets, is that those puzzles were very simple. I'm not saying I don't like hard puzzles, but I like the fact that they gave you something so simple to really give you that this is how it works, these are the mechanics it functions with, and this is how it won't work. So that when the next episode comes, it is much more able to play around with more difficult puzzles with the satisfaction of knowing that you at least understand the basics of it. I've said before, and I will say again, that I do think the Talos Principle, philosophy aside, is a very good puzzle game. But that is all there is to do and say in this episode. I hope I gave you some stuff to think about and entertained you. Do write if there's anything you want me to talk about. I do these episodes about every day, every other day, so chances are I will read yours before the series ends. Take care, and thanks for watching.